Jazzcast Pros.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Getting Real with Bossy with Kelly Bush and Kelly Metris. You just have me today, Kelly Bush, and I want to introduce our next episode. We are interviewing Katie Thomas Young, the CEO of Bloom Consulting Firm in Savannah, Georgia, one of my most favorite cities in the world. You're going to get to hear her story, how she came from a degree in occupational therapy, went on to a career in medical sales, and during COVID, she created this business because she saw this need. She saw what was happening with small businesses, this great pivot that we had to continue doing. Bloom Consulting Firm is a full-service growth firm that provides innovative solutions to branding challenges. Branding is one of the most personal things a business has, so you'll get to learn how she tackles the struggles that come with tweaking and reinventing one of those parts of our business that we hold so close to our hearts. Katie's made every pivot out of personal necessity. It's never for financial gain. She sees these needs, she sees these gaps, and she tackles them and figures out how to fix. Katie's personable. She's so relatable, charming, and passionate. She's a change agent, and she is the winner of CEO of the Year 2023 from CEO Monthly. We hope you enjoy her story.
Hi, I'm Kelly.
And I'm Kelly,
the host of Getting Real with Bossy, the real, raw, and honest podcast about small business ownership. With our experience, 9 businesses in over 25 years, we continue to bear it all and share what we wish we had known.
We move past the must be nices and start getting real.
Leave with another tool for the next time you feel alone on this journey.
And we have with us Katie Thomas Young, who is the CEO of Bloom Consulting Firm, among other titles. We're going to stick with that today because Kelly and I firmly believe that as women, we need to start taking back those power words. We are owners, we are founders, and we are CEOs. We're all the EOs.
My business card isn't big enough for all the chiefs that I am. I'm just the chief. Should it just be like the chief?
I feel like that could get problematic, but I hear where you're going with that.
Not in an indigenous way.
Anyway, thanks for joining us today, Katie. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to dive into things with you guys.
Yeah, we're happy to have you here in from Savannah today. And we are, in honor of our interview today, we decided to make it 90 gazillion degrees here as well, so we could all be sweating. I don't know if you can see how red my face is right now because my office has no air or windows that open. So
bring in the heat. I like it.
Yeah.
So, Katie, we talked a bit on your pre-interview, and I am fascinated by your story. I think a lot of entrepreneurial journeys come out of more random things in life rather than some people, obviously, they go to school for entrepreneurship, they study it, they have a plan. But a lot of the people we talk to, you're answering a need. You're seeing something that needs to be done. You're creating your own path. You're creating your own business. And that's the journey, right? As it just comes kind of out of left field. I think a lot of times when we hear the stories, it doesn't look like left field, but I think it feels like left field. Like this isn't what we went to school for. This isn't what the plan was. So can you tell us, for our listeners, about your story and how you started way back in the day?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. Like I have a very crooked path. And most of the time when people hear like where I got my start, it's that moment of like, they kind of look at you a little confused, like, oh, interesting. And like, now we're here. But when you follow it all the way through, it's not as disconnected as it sounds like if you just go starting point to end point. But I grew up family of entrepreneurs though. So my dad owns a business. But when I went to school, when I went to college, I played sports. I was the kid that was like, I don't know what life is if it's not sports. So with that came like the thought of sports medicine, of therapy, of those types of things. So I actually went to school to be an occupational therapist, which I do have my master's in. And I did practice as an occupational therapist, which is definitely not a marketer. Right? It's not a business owner. It's not a marketer. And as I was practicing occupational therapy, I saw a need in the moment with the vendors and the sales reps that I was speaking with. And there was just a gap. And so I kind of explored that gap a little bit, reached out to some people and went from occupational therapy into medical sales. And medical sales, again, I felt like I started to kind of see some gaps in the market and what I was doing and how we were developing the markets in different places and looking at certain audiences and figuring out how to resonate with them, how to communicate that. And from there, COVID hit and I was fine, right, in that corporate space. But what I noticed was that a lot of the small businesses around me were closing their doors. So again, there was kind of that need that you saw. And so I just went around and was like, okay, for, a very small amount of money, if you would like, I can help you maybe determine if there's a pivot strategy. You can look at your market in a different way. Instead of maybe exiting, maybe we can weather the storm. What do you think? I'll help you. Let's keep small business America alive. That was the passion just from watching what my father had done for our life growing up. And then 9 months later, I was like, oh, I have a decision to make, right? I can either go into business for myself and do this, or I can stay where I'm at, which is very comfortable. It's a beautiful job. I love the people that I'm serving here, but there's really this opportunity to kind of grow and develop myself and help more than just one company. And I just leaned into that. So that's a very, very, very short, quick version of it, which I'm sure we'll dive into pieces. But yeah, that's the story.
It's funny that you went from occupational therapist, which I don't have a ton of experience in, but Kelly and I both worked in special needs categories before we owned businesses. I have a master's in special ed, and people always tease me like, oh, you have a master's in special ed and now you own restaurants. And I'm like, you have no idea. Like the skills that job and that degree installed in my head, I use on a regular basis to run my business, to deal with crisis, in so many different levels. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, as an occupational therapist, like you have to create a plan for success, right? So you have to have a streamlined strategy in place. And the way that you look at, I assume each client that you're working with is going to be very different. So it's funny you said that in the beginning, like, yeah, it seems out there and like not cohesive, but then I look at it and I'm like, well, that makes perfect sense. Like for you to have a strategic mindset and that's the job you're doing. It's just that now it's called something else.
Yeah, absolutely. And the premise of occupational therapy is learning how to look at I hate to say, look at what hand you're being dealt, because there is a remedial side of it, right? But a lot of it is how do we figure out what this new pivot looks like, what the new life looks like, and how do we function at the highest capacity with what we have now? So I think that, and it's on such an individual level, like you were saying, is now that you look at everybody and you go, okay, here are all the things that make up this business. And here's what we've got. And now how do we use that, work with it, and grow and make our lives wonderful or better, right? There's that mindset is definitely, yes, still there. I grew up serving throughout college and high school and all of that in the hospitality world though. And I will tell you, if I have a resume across my desk where they've been a server, I'm like, yes, I'm interviewing this person, hands down. I don't care what the rest of the, resume even says at first glance, because if you've dealt with the public and you've been successful and you've done it for longer than a year, you've learned so much already. So, to your industry specifically, I think that you learn a lot of skills transferably there as well.
And on that individual level, right? So every single person you talk to throughout your shift is completely different, and they handle things completely differently, and their expectations are completely different. Their desires are completely different, and you have to manage all of that at the same time.
Yes.
It's a skill set that I think is underutilized in the business world and underappreciated. And I think we have and I'm one of them, people who do well in the industry have a hard time working other places. Because that's what we're good at, is that constant, and we thrive in it because you start getting used to it. And I can't work a desk job. I've had so many desk jobs that I've tried and I'm like, I can't do this. And I joke with Kelly because I'm like, the closest I ever got was working with behaviorally challenged teenagers in a 611 setting where every single moment was different. Every single person's expectations were constantly changing. So it was I had that ability, and then now I'm doing the exact same thing, only not getting tipped for it. So
yeah,
you're right.
We definitely thrive in chaos and pivot. We were made for a pandemic.
Yes. Yes. I think most entrepreneurs are. So.
Right.
But let's not have another one. Let's
No.
pivot back to you deciding to make the jump. So what were some of the contributing factors, and what were some of the things? I mean, comfort, right? I assume there was like benefits and a set schedule and pay rates and those things that come with a job. But
actually, every single time I have made a pivot, it has been what most people would consider a backwards pivot in initial start. You know, like whenever I made the pivot from an occupational therapy into medical sales, I took a $60,000 a year pay cut overnight. I lost all my medical benefits. I lost an entire team support because whenever I first went into that, they were like, we don't hire therapists, we hire business people, you know?
Yeah, you had to like talk them into this, correct?
Yeah. I was like, I'm good for it. Like, let me try this out. I can speak the language. I know the people that you're serving. I understand like all the functionality of the human. I can learn the products at this in-depth level. But if you have somebody that can only learn the products and they can't understand like the effects and, you know, what the person is that they're serving, you're still missing this like gap. So they were like, maybe, like, we'll see how you do. Like, if you can, you know, if you can do this, then we'll start giving you the support team and all this stuff. I was like, okay, cool. At first, I was like, I don't know if this is the best decision of my life or the craziest. It happened to be the best. But fast forward, like at the end of that year, I had already I'd almost exactly doubled my income previously, even after taking the $60,000 cut initially. And then, you know, whenever I decided to make the pivot again from medical sales into entrepreneurship, I am like thankful that I was smart with my money growing up and I saved because I decided to not get a paycheck for a long time so that I could save up money so that I could afford a team. Because whenever I went into entrepreneurship, like there was no investors, there was no safety net, there was no, you know, capital, no bank would even give me $20 because they were like, what do you have to give us back if you can't pay us our $20? Like your brain, we can't do that, right? So I think every time I took the pivot, it was never, I had health insurance again at that point, went without it. So my pivots were always like, I'm taking a gamble on myself. I see a space. And if I can, I think for me, I hate to even say this because it kind of sounds a little weird, but I believe in myself. And like, if I see that moment where I'm like, oh, I could bring value or I could be a light to other people's situations, I'm not as scared to take the pivot, even if it seems on paper like a backwards pivot to some, if that makes sense.
100%.
Absolutely. And it's working out. You're clearly proof that believing in yourself has worked.
Yeah. I can't imagine my life in either of the two former forms anymore. Like yeah.
Well, I have this conversation with my husband. I'm like, you know, what's the difference between, well, there is a difference, but what's the difference between choosing to invest in ourselves to better our lives than to choose to invest in the stock market? I mean, you're just investing in somebody else's ability to run their business if we invest in the stock market. So if we don't invest in the stock market and instead we invest in ourselves, and I feel like at least we have some control over it.
Yeah. Yeah. My dad used to always say, like, I'm not a betting man, but if I'm betting, it's on me because I can control it. Right. And that stuck with me for a long time too. I'm like, yeah, we give money, you know, to people all the time because we believe in them. But like, you're right. You have no control over what they do at all. So I think you should invest in yourself over the stock market, Kelly.
Well, that's what I'm doing. So thank you. So many scary jumps. Is there anything that you wish you had done differently during any of those jumps, looking back on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing about me is whenever I decide I'm in, I'm like, I'm all in. Like I am a change agent. Like I'm not afraid to shake it up, make it different. Sometimes I can almost run off the cliff. I need a little break in my life. I'm a lot of gas. So I think, you know, if I would could do it differently to set myself up for less stress, less moments of thinking I'm going to need to, get hair therapy or any of those things. It would have just been to start to prepare myself from a mentorship standpoint prior to making the jump or the switch. So I think a lot of skills, as you're learning them in real time, you can feel like you're drinking from a fire hydrant. And I think if you are if there's a way to prepare yourself and align yourself with people that maybe have gone through that beforehand that can make that a little more graceful, that would probably be, the one thing that I would change. You don't know what you don't know, though, in that moment in time. So, but yes, if you're thinking about entrepreneurship, find other entrepreneurs and have a lot of discussions around what was the most important things. What do you wish you knew? I always say your attorney and your CPA, they're going to be the cheapest two people that you hire, despite thinking that they're the most expensive.
Yeah.
Well, it's so important. I mean, this is why we're here, is to get the group of people together to ask these questions. And it's so important to not feel intimidated or like you don't know what you're doing, because just like you said, you don't know what you don't know, and there's no way. And you and I talked about this earlier. When you start your business, you're doing the thing that you know. All that other stuff is still super important. Not as important as the thing that your business is about, but you have to know all of those other things, and there's no way to know it until you're in it. And it's such an important piece. And finding people that you feel comfortable and safe to talk to about is so important for everybody.
And yes, 100%. And knowing where to put your trust and who you can trust, even though you've hired them to be on your team. And that's important too, right? You are going to align yourself with people that know a lot more about you, about areas that your business depends on, right? Your accountant, I'm not an accountant. I know my numbers, but things that they need for even end of the year, all the different forms, right? I had no clue anything about that before being an entrepreneur and going into it. And so you have to find people that you trust significantly to do right by your business. Because if you don't, you need a degree in accounting, you need a degree in law, you need a degree.
Well, and I think there's a level of humility too, right? I know what it felt like when I first took over our business, and even when I started our other businesses, this is your passion. You know everything about it. Other people aren't going to be able to understand. And what I've learned is, yes, that's true to a point, right? I do, my business is very different than a lot of other people, but there are certain things that exist in every business. And to find mentors or peers that can kind of go over that stuff with you. And yeah, you can still navigate all of the things that are different that are going to set you apart and your passion project and all of that. But there's a whole list of things that no matter what business you open, you're going to have these struggles. You're going to, you're going to hit these walls, and to kind of have those ahead of time. And I think that's why a lot of entrepreneurs mentor and like doing that kind of thing, is because we know what it felt like.
Right.
And it's if I could just keep you from making these 3 mistakes, you can make all your other mistakes and still be successful.
Absolutely.
So, Katie, at Bloom Consulting Firm, are you primarily working with small businesses or businesses of all size?
Businesses of all size, but I would say we're more in the upper side of small business to mid-size. That's really where we have found that we can make the most significant impact, is for our clients that are really looking to get, to the next level, where whatever they have done up to this point has been great to get them here, but maybe they're trying to now go from just serving, their community to franchising, or serving, a state to going into the whole country. And they're just trying to grow, elevate visibility, acquire another business, rebrand, whatever that may look like. That's where we find our sweet spot. We are trying to get better at really building a small business engine that is cost effective, that sets people up on the right foot. Because a lot of times when we do get clients, they come to us very frustrated in what they have had up to this point, and that it hasn't, yielded maybe some of the results that they were promised. And we get that quite often. And then it always comes back to like, well, but it's always on a budget constraint is what we learn for the most part. And it's like, oh, it's not necessarily that group that you are working with doesn't know what they're doing, because they probably do. They have a business, right? But you really don't have enough money in the market to move the needle at which you're looking to see that result. And so sometimes to have those conversations, but we're trying to build what kind of package can that look like at that rate that serves everybody.
We're often good about knowing that we need the help, but whether we can afford it or are comfortable, what triggered me to think about this is, Kelly talking about that humility. Like there's times where like, I need some help, but like, don't tell me what I'm doing is wrong. I've tried so hard. I spent so much time. Like this is my baby. I don't want to know. I want the help, but then I have to actually do it. And I think sometimes when you talk about like marketing strategies and rebranding, like you have to stick with that. And you have to put in some effort too. It's not like you can just go in and fix their company for them or make it change in a certain direction. There has to be some buy-in, and it's tough because it's personal sometimes.
Oh, it's personal all the time. And you're exactly right. It's personal all the time, especially if you get those companies that are coming in where they're like, logo and their brand and everything is tied to something that's so sentimental, and it has grown into this beautiful company and business, but they know in their heart that like it has to shift to go to the next level. That is
so hard.
It's so tough. And you come to like, I love those people though so much, because you get to almost feel like you're part of like their family, because you're trying to figure out, how do we bring in those elements? How do we showcase who you are, where it gives that little wink to you every time that you look at it? But now it's positioned as this big corporate brand or this big national brand where it resonates. And it's not, I always tell people like, your last name is probably one of the hardest things to go national with or grow into, right? Because like it's great for local and small because it carries weight. People know who you are. The minute that you go outside of that, it doesn't have the same weight. It's fun. I like it. We have a 10-step process that like we follow pretty religiously, which is where I think kind of puts us out of that small business section, because if you're going to invest in marketing and you're going to invest in advertising, as you said, there should be a layer of research that is first done in understanding your consumer on a different level. And sometimes we learn a lot about the people that we're serving that we had thought that isn't true. And then we'll learn things that, we go, okay, yeah, we knew that. But really taking a look at, who are you serving? How are you serving them? How are you showing up to serve them, not ask them like, hey, buy this from me, right? So it's fun process.
We just realized last year how many male listeners we had on the podcast by running our numbers. And it's things like that I'm fascinated by. Like we just did a seminar on using census data to see, who's coming where, when, so you can actually like know who to promote your business to, and really knowing your target audience and your target market and defining that and what that looks like.
And what's important to those people, right?
Yeah. It's not always what's important to you.
It hardly ever is,
It's like restaurants, we take off our favorite menu items more often than not because that's not what's selling. That's not what people want. Right. And you're like, it like breaks your heart. And you're like, it's the thing you put the most energy into creating. And then you're like, it's not selling. It's going to come off the menu.
Yeah.
Right. Or that one thing that is, you're like, that I did like, there's no prep in that. I'm just literally cooking something that somebody else made. Why is that your favorite? It is sometimes heartbreaking, but you have to you've got to follow those numbers.
Absolutely. We use the little analogy all the time. We're like, okay, you could have you could be selling turkey sandwiches. You could be the only person in town selling turkey sandwiches. You could have the best turkey sandwich on the planet. But if everyone in that town only eats ham sandwiches, like you're not selling a single turkey sandwich, right? So it doesn't matter.
And there's so many places to get numbers. And I think that part of it is, entrepreneurs are doing everything. We're the sea of everything. And it is passion and it is historic, but it's time consuming to be the one out there figuring out who that client is, what they want, where they are, when they're coming, what product is the one that they're buying the most. It's time consuming.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why you have people like us. We can use our time.
And that's why it's worth the money, right? It's something has to be done. And there are certain people that are great at it that don't mind doing the time. There's other people that don't have it. And Kelly and I always talk about you have to know what you're good at and then hire out for everything else.
100%. Stay in your lane, right? Like, I believe in that so much. Like, I'm going to surround myself with people that are way smarter than me in their lane, and I want them to be way smarter than me in that lane.
Right.
Hell yeah.
So we always like to get a little advice from people in your position who are changing small businesses for the better. I have 2 questions about branding. We talk about branding a lot, and they would be, when do you know it's time to rebrand, and what are some things people are doing wrong? And I think you kind of already touched on it, where, just because it's personal to you doesn't mean it's what's going to sell. But when is it time to rebrand? Is it a certain level of success or a certain level of opposite of success, or just time to change things up because, a global pandemic has come and completely changed the restaurant industry? I'm not asking for personal reasons.
Asking for a friend.
The best answer I can say whenever it's time to rebrand is I think a lot of people start to feel it. And I think you just have to be really aware of your audience and the people that you're serving, and also where your goals are, right? I think as an entrepreneur, it's very important to know, like, what's my 10-year plan? What's my 5-year plan? What's my 3-year plan? What's my year-out plan? And is everything that you're doing, is it pointing in that direction, first of all, right? And as you start to make moves in that direction, if you're met with a lot of resistance in various ways, for instance, if you're trying to expand to the next town out, but you have a really good process in this town and a really good brand here, but it's not quite hitting over here, then there's a reason and there's something that we should look at there. And if nothing else has changed, right? And I think that moment that you're looking for growth, the moment that you're looking for something different and it's not hitting the same way that it has been hitting is a key indicator that we need to start taking a look at things. So I guess it's not so black and white. There's not really like a time where you can say, like, oh, once you hit 10 million in sales, you need to look at it. Or once you hit 1 million, you need to look at it. And I guess the next thing I'll say to that too is, like, your brand can also be a lot more than your logo and your name, right? Like, your brand can be your reputation, or how you communicate your message through your sales team, and how your employees walk, talk, and dress and show up. And so there can be a lot of layers there that you could take a look at. And I'm sorry, I feel like that's not like a super cut and dry rebrand.
No, I think it's important when we talk about it and when it comes up in these groups, and it's like, well, maybe it's time to rebrand or look at your brand. And oftentimes I love my logo. I'm like, that's one very small piece of all of that. I think it's important to realize rebranding is a much larger picture, and you can change certain parts of it where you aren't changing your logo that you think is the only reason you're going to be successful. I think people get very attached to things like that. Like, that is how people know me, but it's not just because of your logo.
Yeah, I mean, think about Dodge Ram, right? Like, this is one of my favorite examples of a rebrand that did extremely well. Is back in the day when Ram first came out, they were more on the cheaper line of trucks, right? And if you were a big truck enthusiast, you didn't really go after a Dodge. That was more, economical, and you could have more affordable than the nice new F-150 or whatever the case was. And they started to get that reputation, right? So what they ended up doing is they went back, they invested all this money into new parts, and now their price point was going to go up in their truck. Well, how do you start to charge more for a product that your consumers don't know that you've just put all this money and backing into? And you're now Kia is another great example. You're known in the market as more of the economical vehicle. Well, what they did, they didn't change their logo. They didn't change their colors. They just came back as Ram when they did it, right? And they came in and they taught all their sales team, we're no longer talking about Dodge like this. We're talking about Ram like this. And you have to now know how to articulate the value that Ram has in the market, because we're now going in this direction, not this direction. So that rebrand, and even maybe that better answers even the question that you just asked previously, right? It was like, how do you know when we're ready for a rebrand? Maybe your business just isn't getting what it wants out of the market anymore, right? Like maybe you now want to attract a different type of clientele. Maybe you want to be paid more for your service. Maybe you came in as an entrepreneur. You are scrappy. You're like, I'll take anybody that has a pulse. Give me $1, please. I'm hungry. Like we've all been there. We've all done that. But then you get to a point where you kind of get a little bit of confidence and you're like, okay, I've got some proof of concept I can take back to people. I can show them what I'm worth. That person has to speak differently and be different and have a different brand than the person that was just like, if you're breathing, I'll take you, right? That's a lot of the brand outside of just the logo or the colors or the name. So,
right.
And the recognition goes beyond. So when you see the logos and you see the colors and you see the commercials, like that recognition isn't just visual, it's emotional. So it's the way you've handled everything up to that point to get people to have that emotional response when they see it. They're not just going to see it. If you just see a picture over and over again, you're going to be like, oh yeah, I've seen that picture a million times, but it's not going to have an emotional response. And I think that when we think about branding, we always talk about like the visual, but that emotional response has to happen. So how are we creating that? And like you said with Ram, they had to reconfigure how to manipulate that emotional response.
Yeah, they had to show up differently. And that doesn't always mean visually, right?
Yeah.
Right. Rarely does.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
And you don't have to answer this because it could be giving away information for free. But what are like the few most common things you see small business owners doing wrong?
I would say the number one thing that I see small business owners doing wrong when it comes to their marketing is that they are trying to be everything to everyone on every platform. And I think that there is so much noise in the market space today that tells you, you have to go viral on TikTok. And then you also have to make sure that your SEO is here. And then, now Google's doing everything different and you have to be searchable in this way. And you need to run and not every business needs every tactic. And oftentimes I see people pick a handful of things that feel very comfortable, but don't necessarily move the needle. And they're spending a lot of time and they're spending a lot of resources and they're spending a lot of probably sleepless nights awake, beating their head against the wall, wondering why it's not working. And so I think the biggest thing I could say is like really pay attention to what's actually bringing you revenue and not just what's making us feel good. Right. And I own a marketing company and we do not do SEO on our website.
Okay.
We do SEO on a lot of other people's websites. We are never going to outrank HubSpot. It's never going to happen. Right. So like we are going to spin our wheels and spin our wheels and spin our wheels and spin our wheels and spin our wheels. And we're going to spend so much money there. And that's not the place that makes us our money. That's not the place that makes our business, that gets our business referrals or leads or any of that thing. Now, do not get me wrong. I am by no means telling people not to do SEO. That is not at all what I am saying. I'm saying for my particular business, that is not the bread and butter for us, right? For a lot of like trades, businesses, small business, local, hyper local, you have to do SEO. It's very, very important to do SEO. We service clients all over the country. We're not going to win the SEO war against
You're never going to
competing against. Yeah.
Right.
So.
And I think just understanding what that means, right? I think a lot of small business owners don't understand what SEO even does. They know they're supposed to do it but they don't know why. And I think that's a great example.
And they don't know their metrics. And there's so many people that come to us and they're like, we'll start asking questions and they're like, well, I don't know. Well, I don't know. We don't see that, or we don't understand what that means. And I will say too, like, if you're working with a company and they're not sitting down with you on a monthly basis and educating you and empowering you on like what you're seeing and the numbers and the metrics and how it's being beneficial, and you're not having that two-way street dialogue of like, yes, this is making me money, or I'm not seeing this, it's time to look at another option. You should be getting that information. But what was the original question? We just kind of went down a little.
I think that's a great answer. It was, what do you think small business owners are doing wrong? And I have multiple businesses, and seeing just the difference in social media platforms. Like, certain people respond to certain businesses on certain platforms. So just knowing where to put that energy just in something that small, and where you're putting your social media posts, if that's where the people are, that's where you want to be. If that's not where your people are, I have a business, my people are not on TikTok. I want a TikTok. TikTok's fun. I'd love to go viral on TikTok, but it's not going to bring me money. The people, if I ever did go viral, are not in Rochester. They're going to be all over the world, and they're not going to come buy tacos for me.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and you're a perfect example of like local SEO being very important. Very important. Because the minute that somebody says, I want tacos, where do I go? Like, you better be number one, right? Like, that's where you want to be. Like I said, it's very different in our world, right?
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's fascinating. And I think that's something that we see on a micro level, a lot of people don't understand.
It's hard. It goes back to that. Like, you have to know how to be a CPA or how to be an attorney, as the examples that I used in the beginning. But if you're a craftsman at your trade, or you're a craftsman at what you do best at owning a restaurant, then chances are you don't have a degree in marketing and branding, right? And if you asked me to open a restaurant, I could pour myself a drink and I could maybe figure out how to turn the grill on, but it's not what I would know how to do.
So do you have anything you're working on right now that you're excited about that's upcoming and new or fun?
Yeah, we have a lot that's coming in the pipeline. I would say, right now, what we're focusing on is putting the right people in the right seats. We're really focusing on how do we get people in place to support the growth that we're looking to do. We are, like I said earlier, trying to really figure out how do we support more small business owners where they feel empowered and comfortable and confident, and build that trust so that we can help them grow as well. So I think the next big leg of the business that you'll see will come from the small business side of things. And what that may look like is still, it being hashed out completely. But right now the focus is the people and making sure that we can support what we try to bring in.
I think I read or was told, actually, I think it was 10,000 small business owners, that something like over 60% of all Americans are employed by small business owners, not like 500 employees or less, but like small, what I would almost consider micro business owners, even though the government doesn't really navigate it that way. So yeah, we're out there and we need help. So we appreciate that you're looking at ways to try to reach us, because
you keep us posted on that.
Yeah, we will do. The hard part comes in, like I said, it's like you want to be able to provide growth, right? You want to be able to provide impact, and it's so important, especially when, you meet people like the two of you that are directly impacted by every dollar gained or lost. I'm also a small business owner. Like, I know that feeling, right? It's so important to be able to make sure that you deliver on it, which in my opinion comes from a lot of that layer of research and really granularly getting in there and getting your hands completely in the mud with those people. And just sometimes in order to do that, it takes just a bigger chunk of a team, which is where the hang up can sometimes come into play, is like, we can do it, right? We can take your stuff and we can execute and implement tactics that we know are tried and that we know are true and that we know are going to have value. But for me, I'm like, I like to, for lack of better terms, like we're playing to win, right? So if we take you on as a client, like you're going to be the best restaurant in that city, or we're not playing this, or we're not playing game, we're not playing ball. And so we're trying to figure out like, how do we take this 10-step process and how do we bring it to a level where it's not that big of an investment, but it's still doable for those, like I said, micro business was a great way to kind of label things. And because micro businesses aren't always going to stay micro businesses, right? But the right tactics. So.
Well, and I think what you're doing is really important for the businesses who are looking to pivot and are looking for that more massive growth, right? I think on a micro business level, sometimes we're just looking to open a second location or take those first couple of steps. And that doesn't mean that, I always tell people, we all started the same, whether you're Jeff Bezos and you were selling books out of a garage or, you're Mark Zuckerberg and you're, making a fun platform for dating. Like we all started the same. It's whether or not you want to make those giant leaps and jumps into becoming, a national thing. But yeah, there's other steps that have to happen in the beginning.
100%. And you just said something that I'll just share my thought on really quick. But it's like so many entrepreneurs that I meet, and I was guilty of this at one point in time too. Like they measure their worth based on like the Jeff Bezos and based on the Elon Musks and the Mark Zuckerbergs. And they're like, well, I did this and I'm supposed to be here overnight. And this is what it's supposed to look like. And that is like, those are the unicorns, right? Like for 99, I feel like 0.5% of America's small business owners, that's not what our lives look like, right? Like we're not all Jeff Bezos. And that does not mean that you're not successful because of that either, though.
Well, right. And when he was a micro business, it didn't happen overnight. A lot of the giant jumps happened once he was already in that medium to larger business model where he had the teams and the availability and the cash flow and the access to debt to be able to take those massive jumps. But people underestimate all of the things that happened before then. And I know we talk about the pandemic a lot. It's stupid. I know it's supposedly over. We live in a new world. But that was like the moment for me. It was a defining moment when I walked into work one day and I had a staff meeting and I said, listen, none of us know what's going on. Walmart doesn't know what's going on. Amazon doesn't know what's going on. UPS doesn't know none of us know what's happening next week. So you can either stay here and ride this out with me, or you can go work at Walmart or Amazon where at least they have the cash flow to keep it going. But they don't have answers either. And that was the defining moment for me because I always said these things and I believe them, but it really instituted that solidification of we're all just human beings doing the work and we're just doing it on different levels. So for the people that want to make those giant jumps, how do they reach you?
They can find me on LinkedIn or they can visit our website. It's just bloomconsultingfirm.com. And there are many forms throughout the site where they can leave their information. And then someone on our team will be in touch with them within 12 to 24 hours, I like to say. But we also do give out a free consultation. And so we've got a link as well that I'm happy to share with you guys if you want to put into your podcast where they can meet with a girl on our team named Brittany. She actually does come from 10 years in the small business section of the world, and she will give free consultation and then kind of walk you through if there's any next steps.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yes, please send us the link.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed Katie's story as much as we did, and we'd love to hear from you. If you have any branding challenges, let us know. You can reach us at info@bossyrock.com, BOSSYROC, and reach out. Let us know how you're doing, how things are going. If you've had some pivots, we'd love to hear your story. Remember, be bold, be brave, be the boss.